Hi, and welcome to April in Jane Austen's world. The nights are getting lighter, the flowers are out, spring is definitely here. And Lady Catherine de Bourgh would have our mothers send us to London at this time of year for the benefit of the masters, basically meaning to study artwork in the galleries there for our education. Now, if you would like your own Regency gossip by post and your own Regency letters, head to our Etsy shop where you can get a letter from any of the novels. Now, let's head over to Pride and Prejudice and see what's going on there. Now, it's in the month of April that one of the biggest events to happen in Pride and Prejudice happens. And of course, that is Mr. Darcy's first proposal to Elizabeth. That awful, insulting, cringe-worthy proposal that leaves both mortally offended. Now, on this day, Lizzie is staying at Mr. and Mrs. Collins' parsonage in Kent, and she's spending the morning reading through her letters from Jane. Lizzie is worried about Jane because she knows she's heartbroken because of her estrangement from Mr. Bingley. And just as Lizzie is thinking how fortunate it is that Mr. Darcy will be finishing his visit to Rosings in a day's time, he turns up at the parsonage. Interestingly, it's in this scene that Lizzie hints that she's very fond of Colonel Fitzwilliam, who has actually been visiting her at the parsonage, and for a moment she is quite excited that he may be the caller. Now, wouldn't that make a great alternative storyline, Lizzie and Colonel Fitzwilliam getting together? Now, anyway, I won't go through the entire proposal as we all know it went really badly, and we all know how it goes. So I'm just going to pick out a couple of the best lines. So when Darcy insults Lizzie's family, and I think his most offensive line is, "Could you expect me to rejoice in the inferiority of your connections, to congratulate myself on the hope of relations whose condition in life is so decidedly beneath my own?" And I think Lizzie's probably harshest line would be, "Your manners, impressing me with the fullest belief of your arrogance, your conceit, and your selfish disdain of the feelings of others." She also throws in, just for good measure, "I had not known you a month before I felt that you were the last man in the world whom I could ever be prevailed on to marry." So that's the only event that really happens in April in Pride and Prejudice. So next up is Northanger Abbey. It's in this month of April that Catherine receives an embarrassing letter from Isabella. So Catherine is having a great time at Northanger in Gloucestershire, living her gothic fantasy with Mr. Tilney and his sister. And in this month, Isabella sends Catherine a letter from Bath, not long after James has written to Catherine to tell her that his engagement to Isabella is broken. Now, Isabella is her usual manipulative self in this letter, and having ignored Catherine's letters for a while, she's suddenly motivated to write to Catherine, beseeching her to intervene on her behalf to encourage her brother to make up with her. As we all know, Isabella is a flirt, and James has discovered she is insincere and was flirting with Captain Tilney. Isabella, of course, puts all the blame on the captain and none on herself, acting confused that James has left her. Now, Catherine finally understands Isabella's character when she reads this letter and has absolutely no intention of interceding. In the 2007 adaptation of this, it's shown that Isabella has been intimate with Captain Tilney, so I often wondered what became of her and if she was ruined. You can understand why she would be so desperate to fall back on her engagement to James after being seduced by Captain Tilney. Perhaps she was incredibly anxious to prevent her ruin. Who knows? Off to Highbury now to see Emma, and Mrs. Elton is forcing poor Jane Fairfax into governess jobs, and she's being very annoying on the whole. So it's in the month of April that Emma feels duty bound to hold a dinner party at Hartfield in honour of the new Mr. and Mrs. Elton. Now, Harriet, unfortunately, is still too heartbroken to be in the company of Mr. and Mrs. Elton, so Jane Fairfax is invited in her place. It's at this dinner party that Mrs. Elton is uncompromising in her pushiness to find Jane Fairfax a governess position and laments how Jane is a sad girl who does not know how to look after herself after hearing she walked to the post office in the rain. She is so very condescending and pushy, you have to feel for poor Jane Fairfax. Mrs. Elton bemoans to Jane, Here is April come. I get quite anxious about you. June will soon be here. It's also at this dinner party that Mr. Weston excitedly brings news from a letter that Frank Churchill will be returning to Highbury next week. And off to Mansfield, and some happy news for Sir Thomas in Antigua. Now, Sir Thomas has received the news that his daughter is to be married to Mr. Rushworth, and he is very pleased that she has made such an advantageous match, even though his daughter has been heard to say, if this man had not 12,000 a year, he'd be a very stupid fellow. Now, Sir Thomas writes a letter home in April to declare that his business will be finalised and he will return in the summer for the wedding. Over to Fanny, and she is still in Portsmouth in April, and she really misses Mansfield. She laments that the end of April is drawing close, and she still has not heard a word from her uncle regarding her return. She says she's been in Portsmouth 3 months instead of 2. If you want to find out why Fanny is in Portsmouth and what she's been getting up to there, watch our March version of this video. Sense and Sensibility. Off to Somersetshire, where Eleanor and Marianne are staying with the Palmers to break up their journey back to Barton Cottage. Marianne was really not keen on staying there, as it's not far from Combe Magna, which was Willoughby's estate, and it really distresses her to have this reminder of Willoughby so close to her. Now, the journey to Cleveland takes them almost 3 days by carriage, and the estate is described as a spacious, modern-built house surrounded by trees on a sloping lawn, a road of smooth gravel winding around a plantation. Almost straight away, Marianne escapes to explore the grounds, and finding a Grecian temple, looks across the horizon, imagining she can see Combe Magna, which is 30 miles away, so she must have pretty good eyesight. Marianne decides in this moment to enjoy her own solidarity during her stay here and take enjoyment in walking the grounds each day. And this is where 2 things happen that are very different from the 1995 version of Sense and Sensibility, which is my favourite. Number 1, Colonel Brandon does not do a Willoughby and rescue Marianne from her walk in the rain, dramatically carrying her into the hall and collapsing under her weight. Marianne simply comes back to the house after her walk where she was caught in the rain and gradually sinks into a serious illness over a few days. Granted, a lot less dramatic. And number 2, Willoughby actually turns up at the house and asks to speak to Eleanor in the book, and he's desperate to ascertain if Marianne is out of danger, his behaviour being so strange to Eleanor that she even questions if he was drunk. And it's in this scene that Willoughby talks to Eleanor and offers an explanation and an apology on the treatment of her sister and his unhappiness. And that's everything that happens in Austen's world in April. So subscribe to our channel and you'll be notified for our next video and find out what happens in May. Also, head to our Etsy store and check out our letters there as well, which gives you all the gossip based from Austen's world. Thanks for watching.